Wuhan was the word on everyone's lips as 2020 began. The epicentre of a mystery new illness that ran rampant, yet hospital staff were silenced for speaking out about the virus. Beijing accused of covering up the extent of the outbreak, traced back to this wildlife wet market.
It's extraordinary that the World Health Organization sees it fit for these wet markets to continue in China. They shouldn't.
In April, amid a nationwide lockdown, Australia went out on a limb demanding an independent international inquiry into the origins of COVID-19.
Well, we need to know the sorts of details that an independent review would identify for us.
The Chinese government was predictably incensed, hitting back with threats of a consumer boycott.
Why should we drink Australian wine, eat Australian beef?
But Australia not backing down.
We will, of course, continue to support moves to ensure there's a proper independent assessment.
The Foreign Minister vindicated a month later, the World Health Assembly passing a motion calling for a comprehensive and impartial investigation into how the pandemic began.
And the resolution is therefore adopted.
But Australian farmers and producers weren't celebrating as China followed through on its trade threat, suspending beef imports from 4 abattoirs in May. The list of exports in the firing line has continued to grow. Wine, seafood, timber and lamb all caught in the crosshairs of the worsening relationship between Canberra and Beijing that deteriorated further when the government unveiled new foreign investment laws, giving the Treasurer the power to force divestment on national security grounds.
Today's reforms to our foreign investment framework are the most significant since the establishment of the Act in 1975.
Tougher legislation targeting China would follow, giving the Foreign Minister the power to cancel any deals struck between state governments and foreign powers. Victoria's involvement in China's Belt and Road Initiative expected to fall foul. Is Victoria's Belt and Road Initiative deal about to be torn up?
This is part of doing a stock take.
Where any foreign government seeks to undermine the sovereignty of Australia's foreign policy by seeking to do deals with subnational governments, Australia needs to protect itself from that.
Well, look, if the Prime Minister's got time to be doing those things, then that's fine for him. I don't.
In another sign of deteriorating ties, the last 2 Australian journalists working in China were forced onto emergency evacuation flights home after a 5-day diplomatic standoff. ABC reporter Bill Birtles and the Financial Review's Michael Smith had been questioned about Cheng Lei, a Chinese-Australian journalist working for CGTN who was detained a week earlier on so-called national security grounds.
DFAT made the initial warnings to my employers and to ourselves last Monday that we should consider leaving China.
If the fractured relationship wasn't already clear, the Chinese embassy here in Canberra gave its bluntest assessment in November, leaking this dossier of 14 grievances in a deliberate ploy to pressure the Morrison government into reversing key policies. On the list, foreign interference laws banning Huawei from the rollout of the 5G network, calling for an inquiry into COVID-19 and speaking out about human rights abuses in Xinjiang and Hong Kong.
Our sovereignty is not up for trade.
Just a week later, Scott Morrison fronted the cameras to demand an apology over an inflammatory tweet by a Chinese government official, the fake image showing an Australian soldier holding a bloodied knife to the throat of an Afghan child, a reference to the Brereton War Crimes Inquiry.
It is deeply offensive.
The trade spat between Canberra and Beijing escalated again in December when Chinese state media reported China was restricting only Australian coal imports.
If that were the case, then that would obviously be in breach of WTO rules.
Australia has been consistent in our approach to our values, our principles and protecting our national interest. It is not we who have changed.
Finishing the year by launching a formal appeal to the World Trade Organization against tariffs on Australian barley, recognising any resolution could take years, but insisting it's the right path.
This is the logical and appropriate next step for Australia to take.
As Minister Birmingham handed the reins of the vexed trade portfolio to Dan Tehan, there is renewed hope of restarting dialogue. But Australia heads into 2021 no closer to rescuing the rocky relationship. Eliza Edwards, Sky News, Canberra.